like to thank you all for coming, sometimes from very far places. I think John Prieber had a particularly a long trip, and because of family problem, will have to leave after the morning session. I thank all of you for being here. Shipping on the Law is the 5th edition, and every edition we add something new, something more interesting. And I also like to show, in particular to our guests, our delegates, but sometimes also to my concitizens, to discover together new beautiful places of this city of Naples, that with all its problem is still has not only a great past, but we hope also a future. Notwithstanding the very formal and I would say theological place we are, today we will speak about very humble, practical things. And after the two opening addresses of my good friends, Emanuele Grimaldi, who is by chance the president of the Italian ship owner, and John Lyras, who has been the president and is a board member of the Greek ship owners. Both Manuel and John were president of the European ship owners. We will have a panel of 8 people I will introduce later. So I give start to the proceedings, and I leave the floor to Emanuele Grimaldi for the first opening address. Please, Emanuele.
Good morning, welcome in Naples. Ladies and gentlemen, Francesco, thank you for the opportunity to make a few brief remarks at the start of this year, Shipping and Law. Let me start by saying that Francesco and his team have once again done an admirable job in attracting some of the most interesting and entertaining speakers in the market to take part today. I look forward to listening and learning, and in a few minutes to discuss the challenges that we have in front of us in this opening session. I'm sure Francesco would also like me to thank you for your attendance and to the sponsor that today have helped to make the event possible with their generous support. I will not take too much of your time, but if you will permit me a few brief observations, I would like to share some thoughts with you. While on the face of it, the world economy appears to be pulling out of the recession we have suffered since 2008, I think it would be a mistake to say that the shipping industry followed the same course and is today out of the woods. There remain significant obstacles to recovery, which affected the present market situation over the last couple of years, and also the future prospects of the industry. First, we have not fully shaken out the marginal players that understandably thrive when times are good. More consolidation, as well as much clear focus on quality is essential if we are to overcome our second primary challenge, regulation and the cost of compliance. I'm sure that, like me, you will have seen warnings from operators in the ECA zone that prices must rise as the cost of meeting the sulfur regulation from next January. But such regulatory instruments may not be enough by themselves to force a change in operating patterns, as we have seen in the Mediterranean, which is not a NECA zone, and some players are content to continue operating with low cost. This is a situation that I'm sorry to say is being perpetuated, often by banks who have not yet taken painful measures they need to clean up their balance sheets and put pressure on those clients who are not performing and may never perform also financially again. I want to stress that this is not simply a commercial consideration. As owners, we are constantly reminded of our obligations to safety of people, ships, cargo and environment. These are not factors that look after themselves. They are issues that require a constant commitment, continuing investment and management focus. Let us consider for a moment what the implication could be if a substandard operator is involved in a major casualty in European waters. Another human tragedy, a further environmental disaster, a grievous hit to insurance community, this would be short-term impact. In the longer term, it seems to me that European regulators, not to mention our global regulators at the IMO, would have no hesitation to impose further regulation upon us, as we have all seen the impacts that knee-jerk regulation can have, and not just in Europe. Would it not be or make more commercial and practical sense for us to act ourselves, together as an industry, to bring up standards to the point where we can effect the changes we need, helping to convince consumers, customers and regulators like that safety and efficiency are our primary concern, and that we are acting to improve in a responsible way. I do not have the answer to all these questions, but I think today's event is an opportunity to consider them in the context that we have listened to our distinguished speakers and panelists today. I hope that more ideas are suggested and the debate is encouraged so that we can begin to address the issues in a way that promotes a healthy and a sustainable future for our industry. So, Francesco, thanks for your invitation to speak at the conference today, and I hand over to you and wish you and all the speaker delegates and sponsors a successful and interesting day. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. I think your presence with us makes this meeting very, very interesting. And I thank you for devoting your precious time to all of us. And we will discuss later in the panel the specific issues. John told me he has got opening address and introduction of 7 minutes, after which we will start to have the first panel of this session. It will be among 6 shipping people, Emanuele, John, Jeff Prever, who is the head global shipping of Jefferies. There will be John Wick, who is the CEO, you all know John, of the Norwegian Hull Club. And then there will be Ugo Salerno, our RINA managing director and CEO. I hope I didn't forget anybody. Then Peppino, who is has been for all of us a very special person, because he has been in our life and is also probably the oldest ship owner, with your uncle Aldo, no? in Italy, and he will try to make the conclusion, to say something after the panel, something wise as usual. After this, we will have, before the end of the first session and the first coffee break, which will take place in the Comunichino, that beautiful room on our right. There will be two very important additions to this session. The General Camporini, who is also Vice President of the Institute of International Affairs in Rome, and he had a gorgeous career in the army. He arrived to be a very important chief of staff of the army. I thank also Admiral Veri, the president of the Institute of High Strategic Studies in Italy, who made the contact with General Camporini. He'll speak about the international situation, the geopolitics that influence so much our trade, our traffics, the shipping sector and the world economy. Then we will have the director of the Foreign Affairs Minister, Marco Del Panta, who will speak about the migration problem with particular reference to the Mediterranean Sea after the tragedy of Lampedusa, and we will touch also the missions that sometimes affected also shipping of rescuing the people on the so-called Mare Nostrum, which now is going in a more, hopefully, European cooperation phase. So after that, we will have the break. And the journalists, in particular the Italian journalists, we have a permanent service of simultaneous translation. They can take advantage of it. Thank you for listening to this communication. And now the floor to Mr.
Just one thing. I think that it is a great privilege to have John Lyras today with us. John Lyras has been not one of the European presidents of the ship owners. He has been and he has been a matter of great inspiration for myself as well. He has been the most outstanding European president, and he was the one that, together with Neil Kinnock, that was the commissioner at that time, have developed the guidelines. And I think the whole shipping community owes a lot to John. Thank you.
I think he's a little bit like Naples. He has done many things in the past, and I am sure he will continue to do a lot of useful things in the future as well.
What can I say? First of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think I told Francesco that my speech is about 7 minutes, but without the compliments. And first of all, I'd like to say that I'm delighted to be in Napoli and in this wonderful Chiesa di Santa Maria Donna Regina, one of the many wonderful venues that we have seen so far, and I'm told that we are going to see some more. And I want to thank the organizers for this conference, which is unique, I think, in terms of its venues and the sort of combination of mundane matters, as Francesco says, in the sense that we discuss them so many times, it seems, especially the last years, but with these really elevating, literally and metaphorically, venues which this city can provide, which of course, as the Emperor Augustus said, is the most Hellenic city in Italy. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm very grateful to Francesco for insisting that I come, because we talked about this at Posidonia last year, and he was very insistent, so I'm very grateful to him. An ancient philosopher, Heraclitus, has said tapandari, which means all flows or everything is in flux. This has always been so for the shipping industry, and especially perhaps today. Shipping, a par excellence global industry, is facing a host of challenges, and I think I would like to concentrate in this opening address on the need to defend, since we are also a maritime law conference, long-standing and unique maritime institutions, such as the well-established principle of strict but limited liability, which is currently facing the challenge of the review of the EU Environmental Liability Directive, the P&I Club system of maritime insurance, which is subject to continuous assessment by the European Commission for eventual anti-competitive behavior, the classification societies which are subject to the EU regulation on recognized organizations, and last but by no means least, the integrity of the IMO itself as global regulator for shipping in the technical and operational fields, and not as a forum for the promotion of national or regional political aspirations. In the era of globalization, there are still countries that adopt a regional stance regarding the regulation of shipping. The phenomenon of regionalism and unilateralism occurs often in the environmental area, but not exclusively. This may be due to covert protectionism, nationalistic ideals, or more often than not, political expediency. However, regional rules, as we all know, are unworkable for ships that call at different ports of the world, a world subject to ever-changing trade patterns. Ships are not elastic entities to conform with the desiderata of local rulers around the world. We should acknowledge that the IMO regulatory regime for international shipping, covering a wide range of topics, is comprehensive. It is therefore worrisome that increasingly regional and unilateral measures preempt or even go beyond international regulations. This tendency is becoming endemic, primarily in the northwestern hemisphere, plus Australia. It is the challenge of aspirational regulations. Particularly in the EU, following the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty in 2010, regulations are framed in general terms, i.e. aspirational or framework regulations, leaving the detail to the so-called comitology procedure. This is a subject dear to lawyers, I dare say, and that means, in effect, mainly delegated acts and implementing acts. Nowadays, there is an overwhelming majority of such acts of EU legislation being adopted, as contrasted to what we were used to, which was regulations and directives. The trouble is that the Treaty of Lisbon in Articles 290 and 291 does not provide a definition of a delegated act, nor a definition of an implementing act, and the boundary between the two is vague. As we all know, the devil is in the details. So shipping becomes a host to the power play and turf wars between EU institutions. For instance, what will be the final details of the MRV system for CO2 emissions, or for the enforcement of SOx emissions from ships? Many important technical issues will require the comitology procedure to spell out their details. In addition to CO2 and SOx emissions, NOx emissions, reception facilities, ship recycling can be added. So there will be many devils and a host of details. Who regulates these very important details? I am told that it will be determined on a case-by-case basis whether we end up with a delegated act or an implementing act. However, objective criteria were not established by the jurisprudence of the European Court of Justice in the so-called biocides case. So the procedures are becoming less transparent and less democratic. Why? Because the Commission legislates and nobody can object, intervene, or advise it in this process. The legislative system is becoming less and less legitimate, it seems to me. The European Court bypasses the issue and it is left to the Council to dispute with the Parliament and the Commission. The practice of framework regulations, which are invariably aspirational, should be opposed. It is part of the hidden power of the Commission. It is characteristic that in 2013, 2,500 technical measures were adopted under the comitology procedure, whilst only 70 regulations or directives were adopted, subject to the visible power of the Commission under the co-decision procedure with the Council and the European Parliament. So the hidden power is encroaching upon the visible power. I think this gives us food for thought as to where the EU is heading generally. And one wonders whether the EU institutions have received the message of the recent European elections. In view of this state of affairs, the shipping industry and its organizations, I believe, must be vigilant in order to anticipate problems and to avoid, as far as possible, becoming the victim of the, in effect, unconstitutional, in my opinion, proceedings mentioned above, which leave little room for proper bona fide consultation with the shipping industry. What this means in practice is that national ship owners associations in particular and shipping and maritime organizations in general must lobby their government and European MPs much more vigorously and consistently than they have done in the past, not only regarding shipping issues specifically, but with regard to the unacceptability of the process of decision-making within the EU. Only member states can change this, presumably at summit level. In addition, as we know, the EU and the Commission aspire to become members of the IMO directly. The Council has so far resisted this, and a so-called gentleman's agreement prevails, whereby theoretically, at least, each EU member state member of the IMO is entitled to state its views. In practice, however, this is not the case because the Commission, through the Coreper, has always determined the position that all the EU member states are expected to support. So the EU members of the IMO effectively speak as a bloc with one voice, and that of the Commission, and it is voiced by the country that happens to be holding the presidency in the EU at the time. This has been the situation for years now and has contributed, no doubt, to the spate of aspirational, unworkable regulations coming out of the IMO. So again, the shipping industry and its organizations, but especially national ship owners associations, have to realize that we need to influence the process in the EU before the Commission imposes its position en bloc through the Coreper. Before, in other words, EU proposals reach the IMO. Once they have reached the IMO, the EU members have been neutralized, and it is very difficult to improve the situation. There is a similar problem with the US, which is just, if not more, intractable due to the constitutional right of states to go beyond federal regulation. But in the IMO, aspirational as many recent US proposals have been, it is one member, albeit a very influential one, and one vote, not 28. Ladies and gentlemen, in general, it goes without saying that aspirational regulations that inter alia mandate equipment and designs not yet available, or regulations developed in order to promote future innovation, as is the case, for instance, with the Ballast Water Management Treatment Convention, cannot be complied with and should not be introduced. Regulations should be workable, widely accepted, and globally implemented and enforced. Francesco, I'm going to stop here. I have other things to say about challenges that we face, especially overcapacity in shipbuilding. But I think that that is enough for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, John. In fact, you'll have time now in the next panel to discuss a bit more, let's say, lively these challenges. And I thank you for your very, very useful and interesting opening address and contribution. Now we are going to pass to the panel. I forgot to tell you that there is another member of the panel, which is not on this table, but there is my very good friend Clive Aston, the president of the London Maritime Arbitrators Association. He will join us, not but to arbitrate also our difference or conciliate, but he's an arbitrator, differences of opinion. And then the final judgment will be by Peppino. Having said this, let me also spend a word about the moderators of the panel. One of them, unfortunately, you know, I have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is that one of the two co-chairman moderators is me. The good news is that the other one is Richard Fulford-Smith. Actually, Richard, he sent me an email. I was trying to discuss with him perhaps potential topics. I was very busy in the very humble practical details of the organization of this conference, like arranging rooms in the hotel, checking if the toilets were working, sorry. But, so we didn't have this. In the end, he sent me an email with some topics, and I didn't have even the time to think about the topics. But, you know, I was very trustful of his contribution. And I said, okay, I'll circulate this. We have done this with the two co-chairmen and the other delegates of the next session, the final session, Diego Pacella and Jeff Primo have been corresponding with various Fabrizio Vettosi and Professor Arturo Capasso and Mediobanca and many of the other banks. But actually Richard, I don't want to say he's a sadist, but he's still a British citizen. Well, he said, no, you should not tell them because it would be much more interesting if we play it by the ear and they are not prepared to the question I will make them. So, I mean, this panel would be particularly interesting because it's like last night speakers band will play by the ear, and I like this game, and I think you'll like this as well. We have got portable microphones, so I think we are all very a bit unpredictable or predictable for some ways when we are professional, but this is not only professional, it's also you know, a little bit of gathering together. So you are free to make the most, how do you say, peculiar question on any topic that you think deserves the attention of the floor. And obviously of the very distinguished panelists who are around me. I want to thank also Maurizio Baracco is one of the most important persons in this church because he's the president of a very old bank, an institution which is Banco di Napoli. And I say this not only because of the fact I have a little bank account on it, but also because some of the treasury of art that are in the city, and this is one of 1,000 sites from Greek, because we have been founded by Greeks, and Roman period up to the Gothic. The lunch will be served in the passage. We go to the old Donna Regina Church, which is truly Gothic. And I recommend everybody to, even if they are not hungry, to stay for the lunch, because we will have a very beautiful time. It's a place even much more beautiful than this one. So you'll allow me, I think we have to just a second of time, and because there are also some other friends who want to say something, but they will not say it with their voice and with their tongue, but by other means. So obviously the timing is never perfect, and I'm like a news journalist, and now I'm trying to fill a little gap, but C'est la vie. That's the life. Thank you for having so much patience and prepare some very, very hot and sexy questions to our distinguished panelists. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you.